All right, Tim Wenzel.
Gonna.
We are here once again, um, talking about the tenets of leading with kindness. And we are going to tackle two very, very important tenets.
Difficult
Um,
tenets for this day and age.
yes, I think so. And our goal is to get real. You and I know one another. We know we are working to work at these things. And I love these. Number 9. This is a biggie. Assuming best intent in others. And number 10 is meaningful conversations. Um, Number 9, assuming best intent in others. And again, these are tenets of leading with kindness. And the question is this: what if we built our culture on the assumption that we all have the best intentions in mind? Let's go.
So we left the last conversation talking about, is leadership about me or we? And that article is actually going to be out by the time both of these hit. I'll probably link it in the comments. And it's a really important question because if we go back to the beginning of this common humanity, we all don't show up the way we want to. We all make mistakes. We all aspire to be here and we land here.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to understand that we have to accept disappointment in every relationship. In fact, if you poll leaders, if you go to any company and say, hey, ideal employee, 2 things, they'll say someone that I can trust to follow through and get it done, a fire and forget type person. You just give them the assignment, you know it's going to get done. 2, someone that's honest. They have integrity. I can trust them. So the fact of the matter is we all intuitively understand that people are going to let us down, and we're trying to find the people who will let us down the least, or give us a heads up when the letdown's coming. And so when we don't show up, or when people don't show up for us, they come at us in that way. They bring the accusation or they deliver feedback and we get defensive. We have a choice. Will I offer them a bit of grace? Because maybe they're in an emotional state. Maybe this came out in a way they didn't expect it to come out or intend for it to land. What if I assumed that they weren't coming after me? What if I assumed that they actually had good intentions for me and maybe it just didn't land the way they hoped?
Mm-hmm.
And this is powerful because it's a choice. It's a choice in a moment to choose me or we. It's a choice to extend grace and say, hey, I don't think that landed the way you hoped it to. Because, and here's why. I know you as this type of person, and I would expect for you to deliver this kind of feedback in this manner because you want this relationship, right? You want us to grow together, to achieve these goals, all of these things. But yet, I feel this way right now. And so, like, I don't think I caught it right. Even when I think, oh, I know, you definitely meant to come at me that way. And it allows people to step back and clarify and save face and take advantage of this moment of grace that you've given to them.
Yeah.
And this is a difficult thing to do in the moment. And it's a thing that we have to train ourselves to do. It's one of those post-it notes that we put on the monitor, right? We cut the non-sticky part off and we say, like, assume best intent, and we tape it there around our laptop so that in the moment we can read it and say, I don't think you meant for this to land this way. What do you think, Rob?
Man, it's well, first of all, something I realized years ago was that and you hear us talk about this at Wild, was that psychology is it's all the invisible things that are affecting. So it's things we can't see, but that are affecting the way we function together in organizations. And so someone could listen to this and think like, wow, this is great, like human stuff. This sounds great for families or outside of work, but this assuming the best intent of others is fascinating to me, because they also, um, I always see both sides of something.
Mhm.
And one thing that I would invite those who are listening to just to entertain was, first of all, is to imagine what would change if you could do this a little bit better. What would change if you could begin to assume better intent and motive on the part of others? And here's where the different kinds of people come into this, is that we work with leaders, some of whom quite simply do not do this. Like, they just assume that people come with motives they should question immediately. It's almost a compulsion to do that. And there are other leaders we work with who actually assume such a different way of thinking, that you have to put yourself in the other shoes. And so what I'm inviting you to consider, not you, but people listening, is because you and I have talked about this, but is that different people struggle with this in different ways. That some people kind of, they think that they're the ones to blame in most situations. They take on that burden, and they do assume good intent on other people's part, but they almost don't assume good intent on their own part. And there's other folks that, quite frankly, feel like everyone's out to get them. And
Right.
and these kind of managers can be really, and leaders and just people can be really difficult to be around. And I the other thing is that I don't always go here, but I think there's a lot of family of origin that lands itself in this, because some of us grew up with a family member who did have a lot of bad intent and motives behind they were manipulative. Some of us grew up with siblings or parents who did that. And so it's not surprising that some of us enter the work world assuming that the other people in our world, when the most important people in our lives from our childhood did not have a pure intent for us, and didn't have the me and we, you know what I mean, going on. And so I think the one thing I might suggest to people too is to realize that there's different kinds of people who come at this differently, and then we have a different challenge.
And this is a challenge that when you hire, and this is why it's a big problem in the security industry.
Huh.
But when you hire people out of government service, out of the military, out of any political occupation, this is the problem. They will most likely assume you're trying to damage them. And this is one of the things that you need to keep track of, you need to be aware of, you need to talk about, and we need to practice. And you need to model as a leader, because it is counter to our survival instinct.
Yeah. I'm amazed, Tim. I've always been amazed. One of my good friends is a state trooper, and I'm amazed at law enforcement folks and police officers who are able to maintain this assumption of best intent of others. And the reason why is because they see the worst of us.
Right.
Like, what percentage of people, if we were all honest, have lied to a cop when he got pulled over? I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, what happens every time where someone's making excuses to try to get out of that ticket. And I get it, because it's going to affect their insurance. But I always talk to my friend, my state trooper friend, and I'm like, and I have a few of them, but this one I just have these conversations. I'm like, I'm amazed that after all you have seen, how many times you've been just lied right to your face, with all the evidence is there, and you still maintained this belief in humanity.
What does he say?
He says you have to. Like, he says, I know myself, and I know that I need grace. People do bad things, and I'm responsible for holding them accountable in those moments. But where would I be without that?
It also comes back to tactical escalation.
Huh.
Why do hostage negotiators do the nice cop first? Try to
Yeah.
get right. It's because in any stressful environment, in any altercation between two people, and even pulling somebody over for a speeding ticket is a low grade altercation.
Mm-hmm.
And any altercation has a high probability of
Of
escalating.
escalation. Huh. Yeah.
And so choosing, that somebody has ill intent, choosing to assume and let them know that you don't think that's where they're coming from, gives them an off ramp to maintain their dignity and begin to de-escalate and keep it at a low boil. It's a way to control the pressure, as you also always say.
Did you all hear that? Like, that is gold, Tim. That is gold. From a management perspective, every little altercation has the possibility of escalating, and even if it's escalating behind the scenes. And so there's power in this in number 9.
It's the heat control that you
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
in controlling the
It's good.
pressure within your teams.
It's good.
And that leads us to
Yeah.
meaningful conversations.
It does. Number 10, meaningful conversations. Let me read it before you prompt this. So, driving question. What if we built our organization's culture around the appetite to have meaningful conversations even when they are difficult?
Yeah, I think I have to edit that. It should say especially when they're difficult. Because here's the thing, if you are in leadership and you shy away from difficult conversations, you are adding toxicity to your work environment.
Yeah.
You are actively contributing to discontent among your team.
Yeah.
And that's why you should really consider if you want to be in leadership or not, because it's not easy. It is a burden, but it can be a happy burden. And there's different ways to do it. I'm writing a series of articles in the Security Journal of America right now about one, if you're not a leader, but you're being called to leadership, or somebody wants to promote you into leadership, or if you are a leader and you're kind of looking in the rearview mirror, there's a crossroads in leadership. There's paths that cross, and you get to choose which direction will I take my leadership style and strategy. And this is one of the main ones. You must have the conversations that people don't want to have if you're going to maintain a healthy workplace, right? And even this is what HR pounds. Hey, if this is reported, like, you can't just say like, oh, hopefully that was an isolated incident, and just, you have to have that conversation and do the right thing. When you have team members that are just a little too much friction, a little too often, you have to have that conversation with them to understand why it is that way, and how they could and should be working together in a joyful environment. Having meaningful conversations, the difficult conversations, is the mechanism for a joyful environment. And it's not a control thing. It's a simmer thing. It's not letting things build up in the pressure cooker to the explosion.
You use something, and we'll include in the chat for this, the comments, a link to a wild conversation we had recently about this. But you mentioned something. I think I know where you might go with my question, but you're using meaningful and difficult conversations interchangeably. And I'm curious about why. Like, because I know you, I think I know where you're going to go with this, but it's like, why would meaningful conversations be difficult conversations, and why, and vice versa? Like, what is?
Well, so here's the thing, going back to mindfulness and purpose.
Yeah.
We should not conduct ourselves at home with our families.
Yeah.
In the workplace, if we're in a position of leadership, mindlessly. We should not just accidentally roll through the maze that we're going through and in and out of situations, because we're not going to show up well, and we're not going to serve anyone well, right? So whenever you have a conversation or you put together a project, you have to, it's your responsibility to infuse meaning that is meaningful for you, meaningful for the company or the family, and everyone else involved. It has to serve a purpose that is universal enough for everyone to gather around. And actually finding that and making sure that that is done will invite some struggle.
Yeah.
And so if you are going to choose the path of leading with meaning and purpose, you have to have difficult conversations. You're going to engage in struggle because you can't turn a blind eye to it, because that will pull everyone away from their purpose. And so meaningful conversations often include or lead to difficult conversations if you're going to lead well.
That's good. That's good. So for everybody listening, I just want to leave you with two questions based on what Tim has talked with us about. One is this: what would change if you could assume the best intent of others? What would change for you and for other people if you could start with an assumption of their best intent, as opposed to maybe something, I love this word this week, nefarious. And then number 10 is, what would change if you as a person or leader could get better at having meaningful conversations, even those meaningful conversations that may be difficult to have? What would change for you and the people within your sphere of influence? So Tim, thank you. Awesome stuff, man.
Hey, and
So
I'm
good.
happy that you've joined me in these. I always love having these conversations with you, and in you and Wild have really helped me think deeper about how I show up for the people that I lead,
Awesome.
and I appreciate that.
Likewise, brother. Likewise.